Hello. Keith, you're our coordinator, aren't you? Would you like to say something in introduction?
Yeah, sure. We're going to be doing a Q&A session now. This is Peter Joseph, creator of the film. This is Jacques Fresco, the originator of the Venus Project in Roxanne Meadows. So if we can try to keep these questions pretty succinct, we don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to be roaming around the audience with this mic for you guys, anybody who has a question. And I guess we've got one here, so let's get started.
We're streaming live, and so we're going to record you while you're talking.
Yeah, that's true.
Go like this if you're running out of time, because I'm sure a lot of people have questions. We want to let everybody get a chance to speak.
Yeah, we just want to make sure everybody has a chance to ask a question. You have one already, right?
My name is Anthony Natoli. I have a question that might pertain to other people. It's actually more along the lines of advice. I have what people would call a pretty decent job, but I feel like if I were to give up that job, I don't know how I would sustain myself. What advice do you have for somebody that wants to pursue this and is kind of concerned about the monetary repercussions of that?
You have to walk both lines in the sense of an activism and communication of new ideas, and also don't compromise yourself and your own well-being because you do need a job. I need a job. Everyone needs a job. You can't not have a job in this system. That's just what the system is. I have run into some people that have been inspired by these ideas, and they'll run out and try to develop their own little communities and get off the grid. That's great for them if they can pull it off, but that doesn't change anything. Doesn't change the system. So all I can really say is that you have to kind of wear this idea on your shoulder. So when you're interacting and you're engaging, you're always willing to bring it up. You're always willing to spread the information. Hopefully your job maybe has a social contribution on a different level. Like if I used to work in advertising, there's nothing there that even remotely contributes to anything. So if you have to work in that field, I don't hold it against you. That's just what you have to do to make money. That's what this system demands. But all I can really say is you have to find that balance between not feeding into this system too much, into the hyper materialism, the conspicuous consumption. And I'm obviously, based on your comment, you obviously do not. And if you find people that do feed into the conspicuous consumption and all the kind of psychological fraud that's been imposed on people to keep this system going by consuming and the vanity and the distortion of morality and not morality, the distortion of values to try and make people feel like they have to engage in all of this materialistic stuff in order to keep the system going. If you can communicate that to people, that's a very good step. And ultimately, it's just a process of communication and balancing your own life without, of course, compromising your well-being. And it's a difficult line to walk, believe me. I know that feeling very, very well in the subtle freelance work that I'll continue to have to do, and you just think to yourself, God, I just can't stand this, because it doesn't do anything, and it just makes you mad. But that's the way it is for now. And if everyone got together and knew about these ideas, it could change very, very rapidly. It could change very, very rapidly. Once people understand that advertising does nothing, yet it's the highest paid, that and essentially the financial markets are the highest paid industries, with some exception, but ultimately incredibly high rates of payment in these industries for two things that contribute nothing to society, have no social contribution whatsoever, huge drivers of GDP. I can go on in different aspects of it, but all I can say is walk the line as best you can, and I unfortunately can't give a better answer than that. I don't know if either of you want to comment on such a...
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. You have to realize we're in transition times, and we're all prostitutes in this system. Right. Everybody's selling something. You're in advertising, and you sell your voice for toothpaste or something like that. We're all prostitutes, so we have to live within this system too. As long as you're educating yourself and talking to others, as Peter said too. Right, that would be helpful too.
Yeah.
And keep working towards this. Read more, learn more, so you can talk to others and answer questions.
In my opinion, the only way something like this will manifest, it's not going to happen through a government institution. There isn't going to be some elected official that says, let's move in this direction. It's just not going to happen. The process of moving through the structure to to even get close to obtaining a position of power in the system nullifies any concept of anything that's countered the status quo. And you see that throughout the entire political spectrum of those that gently begin to challenge it. They're ridiculed and attacked and banned and dismembered in many different ways. You can't go against this system. It's like a cancer. It's not recognized by the immune system. It's a cancer that's there that we just accept, and we think that we can't fight it because the system doesn't see it. And that's what I mean as far as the monetary system. And what I would add is parasites and prostitutes is my favorite phrase, because that's really what it is. It's parasites and prostitutes. All you can be in this system is either a parasite or a prostitute. That's it. I mean, I don't say that to be demeaning towards anybody in the room. That's what it is. It's parasitic in the sense that, say, well, what does an advertising company do? It latches onto a corporation and siphons money from them under the guise of promoting their product. What does a corporation itself do? It's a prostitution institution, which has a bunch of people that work for it, and they sell themselves, sell their labor, sell their ideas for other people to utilize. And I'll leave it at that, because I can run on a tangent. So, next.
Next
I just
question.
want to mention something. And being a cancer, it'll eventually eat its host.
Indeed.
And kill its host.
And that's what it's in the process of doing right now.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
I've noticed from all the 3 movies that I've watched, there's a great concentration of people in the so-called humanities or human sciences that appear on camera and lend credence to everything you're saying. I wonder if there is any fear or not enough buy-in from the natural science. For example, one of the hopeful things that you say at the end of Addendum and even now is that we can generate much more energy than we need already from geothermal sources, aeolic energy and so on and so forth, solar, etc. But we don't see any of those people, geologists or except for the people in oil at the end today, people from those hard sciences, natural sciences, on camera. Is there not enough buy-in from those scientific communities, or are they afraid to show up on camera? What's the situation there?
Well, I bet Jacques could comment a little bit on the Okay, well, she can tell you.
Essentially, why aren't the academicians or the scientists speaking out in this direction?
Wait, he was also related to energy too, so let me just comment on that, the energy issue. The energy issue, I think, it's actually quite prevalent. There are plenty of renewable mediums and plenty of very, very profound mediums, in fact, that are not talked about, such as pressure transducers, things that I didn't even know about until I was introduced to Jacques. The things we talk about in the media, like solar and wind, these are only a fraction of the type of energy possibilities out there in a renewable sense. There are many things that are very counterintuitive to people. This building right now is moving, and you could build into this building pressure transducers that can create energy based on just the stabilization and constant motion of this building. Now, that might seem very minimal, but in fact, it's quite powerful when you put the math together. But would you like to comment on the academics?
Is this switch on?
I think it's on.
It's on.
It is?
Yes.
Can you hear me back there? Well, I don't think that we can do anything to patch up this system. I think it's falling apart. I don't know why, but I've got a rough idea that our President of the United States sold out because he gave the money to the people that created the problem in the first place. So I really don't have any confidence at all in any politicians. But I would rather you didn't take my word for it. I'd rather you question politicians. Ask them how to grow more food for people. They'll say, I don't know. How can you prevent war? I don't know. How can you transmit power along transmission lines with minimal losses? I don't know. What the hell are they doing there? They don't know anything. I've never met a politician that can answer any of those questions. So you vote for those people, and you think that they have some kind of knowledge. They don't. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Well, if you use politics in a system this far advanced technically, you're hurting technology, you're hurting yourselves. Soldiers today, from my point of view, are trained killing machines. If we had anything to do with it, We would send all the soldiers back to school to become problem solvers, how to bridge the difference between nations, how to solve problems, not merely kill. When you kill people, you build hatred over the years. I guess in India they call it the law of karma. But we're producing a very bad thing as we bomb cities and kill women and children. I don't even understand the anti-abortionists. They will shoot a doctor that does abortions. Yet when war comes, we kill pregnant women, children, bomb cities, flatten out everything. You would imagine that the abortionists would fight war, the anti-abortion people, but they don't. So it just shows you how much control there is over our way of looking at things. We're all distorted by our propaganda, by motion pictures, by television. All newscasts are managed. They don't give the news, and nobody has ever lived in a democracy. There are people who come up to me and they say, will the Venus Project be a democracy? I always say, what do you mean by democracy? Will I participate? That's what they mean. So I say, did you vote for the Vietnam War? They said, no. Did you vote for the space program? No. Did you vote for the design of the Capitol? No. Where the hell do you participate? One thing that bothers me is when the President of the United States says, God bless America. Who the hell is he to tell God who to bless? Think about it. So these are the problems we face. So right now, I would prefer that you ask as naughty a question as you can think of about the Venus Project. See if you can find any contradictions or unworkable systems.
Thanks, Jacques.
Thank you.
Next question.
I can get back to that question if you want.
I'm
Yeah.
currently taking a course
we can
on
move
the
on.
virtues of growing plants and soils, and also about how our current understanding of soil science is really lacking in many, many areas, and some specific ways that we can go improve the quality of our soils and the nutrient density of the soils, and thereby food and us. And hearing your hydroponics concept, I was just wondering what is the basis of that idea? Why hydroponics? And because that deeply concerns me, because I'm very much attached to the soil and the concepts I'm learning in this course.
Well, I can quickly comment. I think maybe they would have something to say as well, that in my research on hydroponics and aeroponics is that the reduction of nutrient necessity and the reduction of water necessity is extremely substantial, as I pointed out. Because you can make processes that go straight to the roots as opposed to, say, just dumping water onto soil in a very basic sense. So from an efficiency standpoint, it's been known that it takes much less of those resources, for one, and you can do something that you can't do with soil, at least in the sense of, in a much cleaner sense, is that you can stack these farms in vertical farming, which is a completely new idea. There's an individual at Columbia University that started this idea, very, very well known now. And first of all, arable land, as you probably know, is we're losing lots of topsoil. We have been for quite a while. You have to ask yourself the question, are we going to be able to reinvigorate the soil that we have to continue to feed the growing population, or do we have to go through another route? And I think from one, the standpoint of water preservation, nutrient preservation, the reduction of fertilizers, which are based on hydrocarbons, at least in the industrial application, and then the fact that we have to get away from using just flat single-layer acres that go straight out and go vertical. That's how we're going to accomplish organically, by the way, organically feeding on an industrial scale the entire human population in a regional approach, though, of course, which is why it's presented in the context of the city. So I'm fully in support of the aeroponic and hydroponic preservation, idea. Sorry, I've been awake for a very long period of time and literally flown a couple hours ago, so if I ramble a little bit, just excuse me. But seems to me you might have an argument against it, which I'd love to hear, but we don't want to go in too much length on this. I think anyone who researches hydroponics and aeroponics and what I just pointed out, you'll find that it's very hard to argue with the basic foundation of efficiency, and we don't necessarily need soil if we can generate those nutrients from other sources, which is possible. Okay, we can follow up with him over there.
Oh, okay. Just want to say, first of all, thanks for everything you've done.
Sure.
This is, I think, the best work yet, this
Thanks.
third one. I'm looking forward to the fourth. Get some rest first, though.
Thanks.
The other thing I'd like to say is that in regards to, I don't think that the Venus Project or the Zeitgeist movement would be against something like the discovery that, hey, we really can replenish the soil. Because, I mean, somebody like Joel Salatin, nobody would think that that was like a problem if suddenly regular farming, not regular farming, but, you know, highly advanced farming. You talk about guys like Jerry Brunetti and guys like Joel Salatin and other people who've been doing some really clever things with farming that most people haven't heard of, unless you go to the NOFA conference, like, you know, next week, which will be there. The idea that if the Zeitgeist movement of the Venus Project heard about soil farming improvements, they'd use them.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's no, whatever is the most efficient and can be proven as such is what's applied, period. There's no bias towards anything. It's just what does the science dictate that is obviously calculably the most efficient means to do it, from whatever angle that you come at it from. I really am fascinated by the hydroponics and aeroponics invention, conception, and I think still, and maybe if you have any materials you could send to me, I'd love to hear about these new advents you talk about, because I don't know if you guys know, I mean, obviously, many of you do, many of you don't, but every day it seems new technological advents are coming out now. It's just outrageous how fast things are progressing. So I don't pretend to know everything that's happening. I certainly am always open to new stuff. But Jacques, is there anything you'd like to say on the food cultivation issue in the future?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say there's no such thing as a scientist. If there were, they would not make weapons. They would not make nuclear bombs. They would not make bombers. They would not make machine guns. Technicians are trained in school to be either optical experts, chemists, structural engineers, but they're not given any background in the history of sociology or science or human behavior. So they're just the same kind of products normal people are. And normal, when I use the term normal, I mean fucked up.
Right.
So I see a very different kind of future. I see people trained in school to understand how they relate to nature and to one another. I think that the language we use was designed hundreds of years ago, and it's not possible to communicate with people. Although you talk at people today, and they shake their heads, but it goes into their head and comes out in relation to their background. You don't really talk to people, you talk at people. The proof of it is, if you tell somebody you're going out on a vacation, they say, have a nice weekend. If they were really sane, they'd say, have a nice life. Why just a weekend? I don't understand. It seems so obvious that people are shaped by culture. That if you were brought up in Australia as a baby, you'd say, how are you, mate? Everybody would talk like that. Took a Japanese kid or Afro-American, raised him in Australia, how are you, mate? And if he's raised in Germany, he says, ach du lieber. If he's raised in France, la tour Eiffel, like a Frenchman. So when you say, I'm an individual, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Every word that you use, all your facial expressions come from movies, books, and culture. Don't you see that? If you took a nice white baby from the deep south and raised him by a black family, impoverished black family, he would speak just as a Negro speaks in an impoverished area. So if you took a Negro and raised the baby in England, he'd speak with an Oxford accent, if that's where he's raised. So when you talk of individuality, you're talking about people raised in a slightly different environment you were raised in. But every word you use, every facial expression comes from environment. If you don't understand that, your mother said, cup, papa, mama, on and on down the line. Every word you use is picked up by your culture. When you use the term individuality, or even in a court of law, they say, tell us in your own words what happened. Well, if you did that, you'd say, abalagoobalaba. That's your own words. They don't know what they're talking about. The Supreme Court judges would be considered criminals in the future. All the people in law today would be criminals. All politicians would be looked upon as shameful characters. Some acquaintance of mine I didn't know too well came up to me one day and said, "Jock, I'm running for political office." I said, "I'm so sorry to hear that."
All right, we have a question right here.
Actually, hold on. He was.
I want to thank you guys for your work. It's a simple question.
Sorry, Keith.
Yeah, hello. My name is John, and I have a simple question. It seems that all critical thinkers, if you just listen to what's going on in the world, recognize this the finite nature of our resources. There's a percentage of people that constantly preach the same thing, and it could be argued that change will not be effective, considering this is a real problem facing our society, our civilization, that it could be argued that until there's a critical mass of people that want to effect change, that the change won't be affected. I think a good example of that is what the recent events in Tunisia, that, But the question is,
That's okay.
very
It's okay.
simply, for this to be successful, for this huge problem facing our humanity, since you guys seem to be on the cutting edge, what are the nodes of how do people coalesce? I mean, you guys are obviously not the only people in the world that recognize this as a serious problem that humanity will, a crossroads that we're coming to. So how do we link up to form this critical mass?
That's precisely what the Zeitgeist movement is, which we're in 60 countries right now with I believe upwards between 500 and 600 chapters, and the entire intent of this organization, which is global, which is coordination based. It's not a leadership based organization. It's holographic in the sense that even if one group was to do something, it doesn't necessarily affect another group. It's based on the idea that everyone is functioning at the same basic premise of understanding, which is pursuit towards a resource based economy. And that's exactly what we're doing. And in a way, I read a recent article that hadn't even seen the film yet, but the very opening sentence, it was a semi-mainstream article, "New propaganda film from the Zeitgeist movement." And that's, in a way, that's half true, but this is about stuff. It's not just propaganda and promotion of something. Any real form of art promotes something. Any real form of art is a promotion in the sense of propaganda. And if it doesn't promote something, then it's meaningless, as far as I'm concerned. Art for the sake of art, I'm not interested in. So the Zeitgeist movement is exactly what you're talking about, and that's exactly why I created it, to pursue interest into moving into a resource-based economy based on his life work, ultimately, because he has set up the designs, the cities, he's worked his entire life, generating the technical aspects and blueprints to literally construct the first city and to create the navigation system and everything that we would need, and to have other people understand it as well. So that's exactly what we're doing. And at the end of the film, this last point, I depict the critical mass in a very gestural way, as you might have seen. This is exactly this is exactly the concept, but not the way I see it unfolding. I'm not telling anybody to go out and take their money and throw it on the steps of their central banks, as beautiful as that might be. That's not what I'm advocating at all. What I'm saying is that if people did come together, no one could stop a critical mass. If 50% of the U.S. population didn't pay income taxes, do you think they're going to prosecute you? No, they couldn't do anything. They'd run away. They'd fold the entire income tax. Since the divinity of kings, thousands of years ago, the way you control people is by dividing them up. It's divide and conquer. That's how they've always done it. I say they, not in some conspiracy sense, but every power elite functions in the same basic way. That's just the way power is as we've evolved, and hopefully we'll evolve out of it, but they divide the people up, and that's what you do. And that's how you control people, and then when people finally come together, realize an empirical understanding that we have to preserve resources, understand the train of thought of a direction like this, that as far as I'm concerned is completely empirical. I can't think of any other variation of this. It's not a matter of opinion. The planet is there. The laws of nature are there. If you want to continue species survival, you have to respect these points for efficiencies and maximum sustainability and ultimate optimization at every scale. And that doesn't exist. It's the exact opposite in the monetary system. So one way or another, we're going to move out of this system. And the only question is how much death and destruction is going to occur before we do.
I'd like to answer your question about energy. If we use the geothermal energy of the Earth, volcanic heat, according to geologists and volcanologists, they tell us that there's thousands of years of energy in just the heat of the Earth, forgetting about solar, wind, tidal, thermal differences. Just volcanic energy is enough for thousands of years, that alone. So don't worry about energy shortage.
Well, he wasn't asking about energy. Jock has his hearing aids. He doesn't hear very well at a distance. So the other person was asking about energy, but you're fine. If you want to keep talking about it. He was talking about basically getting people to come together to push towards a resource-based economy.
They will not come together until they lose their houses, their jobs.
It's probably true.
And lose confidence in the people they elected. Then they're ready for change. You cannot affect people. They don't give a damn about one another. People right now are out to make a buck, gain property, power. Why should a person run for political office? They have nothing to offer. They do it, they want to get their name in the history book. But sane people talk to people, and they do not say things people like to hear. Let me put it this way. When people once believed the earth was flat, politicians would say, all right, folks, it's a little round, a little flat. Then you get along with more people. But it's the business of science to tell people they're wrong, that what they believe has no basis of fact. Scientists do not speak to win approval, real scientists. In a sane democratic society, if you had a president, which I don't think you would, he'd get up and he'd criticize another country. Then we would invite the prime minister of that country to get up on the air and give his point of view. Then we'd invite the prime minister of Sweden. He says, they're both full of shit. This is how I see it. That's a democracy. When you have religion only on Sunday, it's managed news. You would have all different types of religions, non-religions, atheism, agnosticism, so the public can hear all points of view, and they can turn it on or off. But when you only hear religion on the air on Sundays, it means it's managed.
And I think
Do you understand that? Why should a person tell the truth? To tell the truth, I meet people all the time that come up to me and say, I'm a nature lover. Oh, you are? You really are? They say, yes. You mean you like tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes? All that's natural. Oh, no. And no one can be a nature lover. There are certain things about nature we like, other things we don't like. So people don't know how to talk. They don't know what they're saying. When a guy says to a girl, I love you, does it mean he wants to get laid? He wants to get married? What does it mean, really? What does love mean? Is there such a thing as love? I don't think so, because I don't know anybody that loves everything they've ever done in life. There are things you've done that were stupid, backward, great. So sometimes you love yourself, sometimes a little less, sometimes not at all. So if you fall in love with somebody, sometimes you fall out of love. So how did I get into this mess? And sometimes you say, it's great. Love is a fluctuating thing. It's never constant. That's why a girl comes up to me sometimes weeping. Say, I don't know if I really love my husband. I say, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Do you love yourself all the time? Of course not. If you live with a replica of yourself, how long would you be together? Think about it.
Hi.
All right, very good.
I just want to say thank you. And also, I was wondering what your thoughts were on climate change and how, say, if the weather became more sporadic, how would you deal with that? Like that immense flexibility that you're going to need with all of their technical structures and all your systems. I think, like if the weather becomes more sporadic, if we have more tornadoes or hurricanes or how are we going to adapt to that? Do you think we're going to be able to adapt to that fast enough, or?
Oh, I can introduce this, and maybe Jacques can comment on it. The only threats that are real are threats to the whole of humanity. I think that's the first thing to point out. And when it comes to natural disasters or any of the things that we've generated, such as climate destabilization, obviously the resolution comes from a purely scientific protocol. I mean, you know, I could go many different angles in this. What do they do with what they call global warming, which is really a combination of things? What do? They made this cap and trade thing where now corporations can trade permits to pollute for profit. Is that, I mean, who came, I mean, we sit by and we let this happen. I mean, it's just the most, they literally took the free market idea of the invisible hand and said, okay, we're going to use the market system to decide how global warming is going to be resolved by letting people trade permits to pollute. And it's just absolutely, it's just beyond comprehension how outrageously insane and unscientific it is, because obviously the destabilization is a technical problem. You find technical solutions and you resolve the source of those solutions. So the answer to your question is actually extremely simple. You simply find the problem and solve it. But when you have a monetary system, you have to go through all these loops and weird backwards things, and you have to deal with the establishments of certain corporations that don't want to, say, hinder their production, like the oil industry, that probably has a big stake in the climate destabilization. You know, there's all these barriers in the financial system of the establishment and the status quo, and that's really the problem. I think if there wasn't that barrier and people thought scientifically and they said, okay, well, here's the problem, we're going to solve it, and boom, they did it, then, you know, that question wouldn't even need to be asked, you know? If there's no resolution, then you work as hard as you can to figure out the resolution. And once you have the resolution, you simply apply it. Why would the species not apply something that would help itself, you know? Only psychotic barriers of the monetary establishment and status quo that limit people, block them off, will allow for such a thing. And that's the paradigm we live in now.
I think that's correct. I think that all societies in the world today are established. We don't want established societies. We want emergent societies that are always growing and changing. If you designed a laptop computer and say, that's it, that's the final frontier, you don't know what you're talking about, because they will change. They get smaller, faster, lighter, cheaper in time. Nothing can be frozen. People say, I'm a utopianist. I believe in utopia. I don't. The cities I design will be a straitjacket for the kids of the future. They'll design their own cities. But if you make a statue of me and put it in the city, you hold people back, because things move on, they change. And when you have heroes, watch out. Whenever you have heroes, they're trying to control you to admire people. I'm no better, no worse than anyone else. I've made a lot of stupid things and moves in my life. I've made poor decisions, but it's the poor decisions that help me. For example, I don't look at myself as good or bad. I look at myself in the same way I looked at the Frenchman that made little wings and jumped off the Eiffel Tower, and he died. And his brother-in-law wrote, make wings larger next time. There's no other way to know. That's why I say nobody ever does anything wrong. You have to think about that. They don't know how big to make wings to build flying machine, so they make them too small. They jump off the top of a barn and break their legs. Guy said, what a stupid thing he did. After you learn how big wings have to be. Don't you see? Nobody makes a mistake. They use the best tools they have. When the volcano rumbles, the witch doctor says you got to make a sacrifice. Throw your brother-in-law into the volcano. If that doesn't work, you've got your sister-in-law, but never the witch doctor or the king. Think about that.
Very good.
My name is Timothy. I'm just wondering, how do you convince a sane person to manage this kind of thing? Like, what's the hierarchy of managing cities and governments? And I mean, it seems like you would have to replace people.
Interdisciplinary teams is the word, where you have a group of teams that overlap substantially. They have specialization naturally, because the human mind can only be capable of so much. But mainly, they're interacting with a database of information. It's a technical process. So rather than decision-making happening from any particular human being, even a scientist, scientists in and of their, in effect, don't make decisions. They constantly reach and arrive at their decisions. That's all. A scientist is engaged in a process, not in a decision-making thing. It's learning and then finding that solution, then finding the next best solution as new input comes in. So these interdisciplinary teams, essentially you'd have an agricultural team for your city system. We'll bring it down to a city level. Then you have your industrial manufacturing team, and they oversee the processes that exist in their particular area. And of course, they interrelate because everything is synergistic related in this type of environment. You have to engage production to engage processes for agricultural mechanisms. You have to engage resources to engage what you would apply towards the approach to grow the food. You know what I mean? Everything is interconnected, in other words. There's no way you can get around that. In fact, that was one of the great things I first learned from you, in that I sort of understood it, but you, like a scientist that simply limits himself to one field arbitrarily is not a scientist, because they're disregarding everything else around them, and you can't do that. I mean, the entire legal system is completely unscientific. Throwing people in jail completely disregards everything about what might have conditioned that individual to behave the way they did. As I said in the film, the scientific approach is absolutely absent in any type of social arena in the world today. It's only in isolated things like how to build a computer or an airplane, and even that's deficient because of the monetary system. But I'll leave it at that. I hope that answers your question. But the interdisciplinary teams, Jacques, do you want to say anything about the interdisciplinary teams that will help run?
Well, in the future, we would not turn out structural engineers or architects or mechanical or electrical engineers. We'll turn out generalists, people that know sociology, social science, the history of civilization, so no one can use them to make weapons of war. I want to hear the other side of the story. In other words, even if somebody were to criticize another country, we would invite the prime minister of that country on the air to give the public their view. Do you understand? A democracy is where you have all points of view on the air. And as long as you don't have that, you're not going to have a true democracy.
With reflect to the interdisciplinary teams, though, for a resource-based economy.
Yes, well, that's different.
Yeah, that's what we were asking about. If you can comment on that.
If you think about it, when scientists were asked to turn out an atom bomb, they did. When you said, can you put a man on the moon? They did. We never asked scientists, how would you design a transportation system that's safe? We never asked them that. How would you design a civilization that wouldn't go to war? We've never put those problems to them. We always put material problems for the benefit of industry. And scientists become victims of culture just like everybody else.
It's another way of dividing and conquering. They're not given the ability to critically think of anything but their specialized discipline. So they can't think outside of their field to think of a social direction, to arrive at a social direction that's sustainable for everyone. They can critically think about their own field and understand that what's wrong with it, some of them, but not very many. So we'd be very curious to see what these people in this film thought about this direction, because nobody has put it all together for a sustainable future.
If you don't understand that, consider this. If you were an Eskimo that never went any other place but lived in the north in an igloo, you say you can have anything you want. What do you want? What would you like? He never says a twin-engine Beechcraft airplane. He can't say that because it's not within the purview of his background. So people cannot think outside of their social system. If you ask a nice Jewish community to sit down with some Nazis and share their values, they can't. If you ask the black community to go to a Klan meeting and share values, they can't, because the community of Klansmen, by the way, there were 3 million members of the Ku Klux Klan when I was a kid in America. They keep saying, give me the good old days. Well, they weren't around the good old days. And 3 million members of the Klan is a hell of a lot of dummies. Yeah. Do you understand what I mean?
Okay.
So every country says we did great things, we did wonderful things. They're all full of shit, all of them. So is your society.
Yes.
And you can't have any of the things they tell you have: freedom, democracy, intellectual growth without revising the way society operates. You can't work within the monetary system. It does not work. In other words, if I have a factory that turns out vacuum cleaners 10 times faster than you, if I share those ideas with you, I lose the competitive edge. So when you take out a patent, you're depriving everybody else of your wonderful ideas. In the future, ideas and all the resources of the earth will belong to all the people of the earth. And until that day, if you don't do that, you will have wars, separation, territorial disputes. You must change the basis of social operation in order to have what you call peace and harmony. You can't have hungry nations. You can't have single nations that own most of the world's resources. That means nothing but trouble.
Thank you.
Let's take another question.